There was a time when the galaxy thought Earth had destroyed itself. A war here, a virus there, famine and collapse that painted the skies with smoke and silence. Probes sent to the solar system returned only static. Patrols were rerouted. Quarantine protocols labeled the region unstable. The ascendancy marked it unworthy of further attention. Death World were dangerous, but more dangerous were the minds they produced. It was better to ignore them. But curiosity, even among the sterile-minded Valari, never truly dies. 5 centuries later, a long-range scout detected signals in the void. Structured, encoded, patterned. Human, not just alive, but thriving and expanding. The Valari Ascendancy dispatched a command vessel immediately. 7 kilometers in length, powered by antimatter and held together by logic, steel, and the unbreakable belief that control was everything. It emerged from FDL above Earth like a blade. They did not introduce themselves. Instead, a signal pulsed across the surface of the planet. Surrender or be silenced. The message was delivered in every human language still in use. No ambiguity. No mercy. The Valari did not expect resistance. They expected fear, obedience, a return to order. All things they had cultivated across 1,000 worlds. Earth's orbit was silent for 12 hours. Then a shuttle was launched from the surface. Old technology. Crude, slow, entirely unshielded. It carried one man. No weapons. No escort. Just a man in a pressurized suit, casually gliding toward the waiting alien dreadnought, like a grain of dust approaching a storm. He docked manually, refused translation software, stepped into the Valari chamber, and took a long breath. The atmosphere was wrong. Too clean. No scent of oil, blood, or ozone. The alien representative stood motionless, tall and silver-skinned, skin shimmering like mercury. He grinned. His name was Elias Van. On Earth, he was known only to a few. Former theoretical physicist, consultant to no one, ghost in the research archives. Vanished 10 years ago after a paper titled Deterministic Rejection of Dimensional Consistency was pulled from every database in the solar network for causing a mass panic in the scientific community. Now he was humanity's voice. The lead Valari stepped forward. It moved with fluid precision, its limbs jointless, its face an abstract shimmer of lights and patterns. "You are the representative of your species?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, counted how many lights there were, noted the curvature of the ceiling, how the floor vibrated under his boots. Finally, he said, "I suppose I am. You have received our terms." "I did." "Then you understand the consequences of refusal." "I do." Silence stretched. The Valari waited for submission. Elias started laughing. It was a full, deep laugh, not derisive, not mocking, but sincere, as if something truly funny had just occurred to him. The Valari did not understand. "You find this amusing?" Elias wiped a tear from his eye. "No, not amusing. I find it inevitable." "Clarify." "You came here thinking we'd kneel, that we'd shiver under your weapons and algorithms. That fear would shut us down. But you forgot where you landed. This is a death world. Your kind should not exist. Your survival is an accident." "That's your first mistake," Elias said. "You think survival is a result. For us, it's a method." The Valari cocked its head. "You intend to fight?" "Fight? No. That implies parity. You brought a chessboard. We play with fire." They moved to detain him, but he raised a hand. "You want to delay that? Because in 43 seconds, something impossible is going to happen, and you're going to need a few seconds to process it." The Valari hesitated, not out of fear, but out of caution. They were efficient beings, not reckless. 43 seconds later, the dreadnought's internal sensors pinged. A small human satellite had disappeared from low Earth orbit, vanished completely, then reappeared inside the reactor housing of the Valari escort ship in lunar orbit. There was no explosion, just silence. A silence so deep the void itself seemed to lean in. The escort ship folded in on itself, its mass collapsing into a point of spatial contradiction. Not a black hole, Not even a singularity. Just not there anymore. 1 second, a ship. The next, a philosophical riddle. The Valari commander reeled back. What did you do? Elias smiled. We stopped asking what's possible. Started asking what's useful. That defies logic. Exactly. That's how we win. Back on Earth, the event was broadcast live across every human network. Not the explosion, there was none, but Elias's words and his laugh. That laugh spread like wildfire. It wasn't bravado. It was a statement of fact. We will not kneel. Across the planet, people stopped being afraid. Not because they thought they could win, but because they realized something simple. The rules had changed. The Valari, disturbed by the anomaly, initiated a full system scan. Thousands of subdrones mapped every inch of Earth's orbit, searching for gravitational distortions, energy signatures, anything that could explain what they had witnessed. They found no emissions, no radiation trails, no energy debt. What they found instead was a pattern in background gravity. Subtle, deliberate, human-made. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't even technology in the traditional sense. It was intent made physical. Project Backbone had activated. Hidden across the planet in caverns, trenches, mountain cores, and oceanic faults were machines that did not operate on standard power. They were old ideas made real. Equations once dismissed as paradoxes now carved into titanium and cooled with subcrust geothermal regulators. Each machine did one thing. It changed constants. Just a little. Just enough. Enough to make certain alien systems inconsistent. Valari kinetic shielding began to drift in frequency. Their sensor arrays lost calibration. Their quantum cores reported contradictory states. And Earth hadn't fired a single shot. The Valari ascendancy wasn't used to improvisation. They were used to precision, perfection. They attempted to compensate, adapt, simulate. They failed. Every simulation they ran included variables that no longer applied. Gravity had ceased to behave like gravity. Mass was fluctuating subtly in orbit. Light was redshifting incorrectly. Entropy was reversing in small, local pockets. They concluded Earth was violating universal law. They were correct. Elias returned to the surface without interference. No one stopped him. The Valari needed time to understand. But they had no time. Within hours, Valari relay satellites began reporting malfunctions. Then a relay exploded from the inside. Its internal mass had increased 9,000%. No weapon had touched it. Back on the ground, Elias stood in a room lit only by shifting magnetic fields. Around him were 13 individuals. Each had been declared missing, dead, or unfit for society. The Valari dreadnought remained above Earth, paralyzed, not by force, but by uncertainty. Systems refused to behave as designed. Protocols returned null. Predictive models shattered under the weight of contradiction. Earth had become unreadable, not shielded, not defended, altered. On the third day, the Valari dispatched a probe equipped with redundant logic cores and isolation shielding. It disintegrated 1 kilometer above Earth, not from impact, but from irreconcilable existential strain. Its data logs ended with a single fragment. This cannot be. Valari Command summoned a Thinker-class artificial to analyze the growing paradox. The AI, designated Vorth 7, had successfully calculated political futures with 99.99% accuracy for 6 centuries. It observed the data, processed every anomaly, and returned a forward conclusion. Humanity is post-axiomatic. Confusion followed. That term did not exist in the Valari lexicon. Vorth 7 explained, the humans had transcended reliance on fixed universal laws. They no longer obeyed reality. They negotiated with it. This was not evolution. This was rejection. Valari's strategy disintegrated. Their entire civilization operated on predictive constraint. Logic, sequence, consequence. It had brought them dominion over 600 systems. Against humanity, it became a liability. On Earth, Elias and the 13 continued phase escalation. Project Backbone was only the foundation. Above it were layers. Each layer a weapon not of matter or energy, but of abstraction. Humans had begun to weaponize certainty. probability. Choice: a Valari spy drone, hidden inside a Martian rock for 5 years, activated a counter-observation protocol. It transmitted a live visual feed back to the dreadnought. The feed showed a man walking through solid rock, not teleporting, not phasing, simply choosing not to acknowledge it as solid. The drone self-terminated to preserve sanity. At the edge of the solar system, Valari reinforcements arrived. 12 ships, each designed for system-wide enforcement. They calculated every battle scenario. None included defeat. Upon arrival, they observed gravitational readings inconsistent with solar mass. The sun's pull had increased by 0.04%. That should have been impossible. But Earth's manipulations had begun to ripple. Elias met with the Mars colonists next. They had completed the subsurface decoupler, a device designed to exist in multiple contradictory states. It hovered above a crater, casting no shadow, emitting no energy, yet visibly present. He activated it. The reinforcements in orbit began transmitting distress signals. Half of their sensors began reporting events from a day in the future. The other half reported data from a day prior. Their AIs collapsed into indecision loops. Without coherence, the fleet could not act. It was not sabotage. It was conceptual overload. The humans had achieved weaponized paradox. On Europa, an underwater lab deployed a time-lock beacon. It pulsed once every 17 seconds. Each pulse was felt by the Valari, not as sound or signal, but as an unshakable feeling of future loss. The psychological effect was immediate. Crew members across multiple ships began experiencing disassociation, not from fear, from the inability to comprehend fate as mutable. The Valari had believed in absolutes, truth, law, cause and effect. Humanity was unraveling those beliefs. Meanwhile, Earth was accelerating. Terran researchers unveiled a new engine type, not a drive, but a concept displacement generator. Instead of moving ships, it redefined where they had always been: space travel without motion. Within 3 days, human vessels appeared near Titan, Neptune, and Pluto simultaneously, not because they moved fast, but because they were no longer confined by singular existence. Valari AI intercepted the transmission logs from these ships. One phrase stood out: "We are not multiplying. We are choosing multiplicity." They began to understand the horror. Humans had ceased being a linear species. On the 4th day, Elias received a message from an unknown source. Not Earth, not Valari. The origin point was untraceable. The signal structure was entirely non-local. The message read, "They are watching. Do not awaken the core." Elias showed it to the others. One nodded. They noticed. Another asked, "Do we proceed?" Elias replied, "Of course. We're just getting started." They activated the core distorter. Its function was simple: create localized inconsistencies in physical law. Gravity would apply sideways. Time would ripple backward over milliseconds. Cause would occasionally follow effect. The first test was conducted in the asteroid belt. One of the Valari support vessels monitoring the region began to report dual positional data. It was both where it was and where it had never been. The crew could feel themselves aging out of sync. Then the ship inverted. Not physically, not geometrically. Its concept of ship reversed. Its bulkheads became ideas. Its crew became memories. And then it was gone. Elias read the telemetry. Good. We can now remove enemies from stories. Not kill, not destroy. Erase narrative relevance. On Earth, Project Babel initiated. It wasn't a weapon. It was a language not spoken or written, but realized. A grammar of cause and potential. Humans began to speak in it experimentally. Valari linguists intercepted a fragment and went mad. Not due to complexity, due to clarity. It revealed truths the Valari mind could not contain. That their laws were local, their supremacy, an illusion of unchallenged history. One Valari admiral collapsed and began carving spirals into the walls of his ship using his own fingers. When restrained, he whispered, "We are the cage. They are the key." The Ascendancy tried one final measure. They deployed a logic spike, an artificial idea engineered to override enemy thought patterns and instill submission through cascading cognitive domination. It had worked on dozens of species. When released toward Earth, it failed. Not because it was blocked, because humans replied. Not verbally, not with code, but with a counterthought. A mimetic countermeasure embedded in a joke, spoken by a 6-year-old girl in Alaska to her brother. He laughed. The spike shattered. Across Volari systems, subordinate species began to rebel, not with weapons, with questions. The very presence of humanity was altering galactic thought. Elias convened the 13 again. We need to finalize Phase 3. Begin work on the observer trap. They began constructing an idea, not a machine, not a weapon, a concept, a narrative construct that could ensnare any entity that attempted to observe Earth too deeply. It didn't block vision. It created stories the observer couldn't escape. On day 5, the Volari dreadnought tried to map Earth's strategic potential. Its central AI activated full-spectrum quantum modeling. It became trapped in a recursive tale of betrayal and redemption, featuring itself as a sentient whale. The dreadnought lost navigation and drifted. Back on Earth, Elias monitored fluctuations in universal constants. Planck's constant had begun to shift. Not randomly, deliberately. He checked the delta rate. It matched Beethoven's Fifth. Humanity had begun rewriting physics to music. Elias smiled. We're almost there. Volari homeworlds entered lockdown. The Council of Ascendancy ordered all contact with Earth terminated. They feared contagion, not biological, conceptual, but it was too late. The sky whispered, not in sound but intent. Astronomers reported constellations shifting without motion, as if the stars had begun to blink in a language lost before light itself. Governments collapsed their hierarchies into singular task forces. There was no room left for division. Humanity had ascended into a state of conceptual warfare. Politics was irrelevant. Borders had become artifacts. Earth was not a planet anymore. It was a fulcrum. Elias stood in the presence chamber. 13 had become 9. 4 of them had departed beyond causality. Their physical forms unsuited for the paths they had opened. Their consciousness still echoed across probability. They were not dead. They had become reference points. The observer trap had exceeded expectations. Volari space remained sealed not by blockade, but by narrative isolation. Attempt to model Earth resulted in recursive loops that rewrote the modelers. The ascendancy collapsed not through combat, but from introspection. Each species they'd subjugated began asking the wrong questions. What is true? What is choice? What is self? Their empires dissolved like salt in water. Their weapons, based on fixed assumptions, refused to fire, not due to damage, due to obsolescence. Earth's atmosphere now emitted trace particles of anti-meaning. Sensors registered them as informational voids. Data collectors went silent, not broken but humbled. The very idea of Earth had become a filter. Only minds capable of tolerating paradox could observe without distortion. Deep beneath Antarctica, the Echo Vault opened. It had not been built. It had always been. A gift from those who came before humanity, or from those who came after and returned. Inside was a sphere that reflected nothing. Not light, not energy, not thought. It was perfectly unaddressable. And yet Elias entered it. Inside, time fractured politely. It split into versions of him. In one, he was an old man laughing at the stars. In another, he was a child carving fractals into ice. In all of them, he was afraid. The sphere offered no knowledge, only position. It showed him where humanity stood in the tapestry of sentient possibility. They were not at the top. They were not at the bottom. They were the edge. The precursor Echo had noticed. Entities from before reason stirred. They did not come in ships. They arrived as fluctuations in interpretation. Museums began reporting artifacts rewriting themselves. Dinosaurs were now described as travelers. Classical paintings revealed new brushstrokes. History's bedrock shifted gently, without apology. At CERN, the last particle accelerator dissolved into metaphor. It no longer smashed particles. It debated them. Courts were found refusing participation in experiments they deemed unethical. Humanity smiled. They leaned in. Curiosity overrode fear. Then came the silent arrival. Across multiple observatories, signals ceased not due to interruption, but agreement. Telescopes turned themselves inward. Gravitational waves patterned into music. The void had begun to hum in anticipation. Elias called the nine. They initiated Project Dialogue. It was not communication. It was compatibility. Not whether they could speak, but whether they should. Mathematicians converted ethics into waveform. Philosophers encoded morality in prime gaps. Children were taught paradox as grammar. Schools began issuing puzzles with no answers as exams. Earth began building the thought array, a planetary structure that amplified intention, not signal. Its frame was composed of ideas harvested from dreams. Power came from conviction, harvested during moments of selfless choice. It pulsed once every 42 minutes. And then something answered. Not a voice, not a presence, a permission. Coordinates not in space, but in consensus. An address encoded in all languages simultaneously, even extinct ones. It did not point somewhere. It pointed when. Elias understood. They would not come here. Humanity had to go there, not with engines, with alignment. The nine began the resonance protocol. Step 1. Synchronize human empathy across planetary scale. Step 2. Remove all assumptions of identity. Step 3. Accept contradiction as foundation. The thought array began to shimmer. Mountains turned translucent. Rivers ran with backward time. The moon flickered between realities. Humanity stood unified, not by law, but by story. Each person became a node in the array. And then the threshold was crossed. For 0.14 seconds, Earth ceased to exist. It was not destroyed. It was relocated into a higher interpretive frame. From the outside, it became a theoretical construct. From within, reality had grown more accommodating. Thoughts manifested architecture. Desires became inertia. Language defined matter. And then the precursors arrived. They were not shapes. They were not minds. They were questions. Each took the form of an unanswered why. They entered Earth's new phase through the medium of speculation. Philosophers felt them first, in dreams. 1,000 thinkers across the planet simultaneously awoke with bleeding noses, and a single sentence etched in memory. Do you know what you are? Elias answered, We are the edge. The precursors paused. A moment later, the oceans rose in patterns only visible from orbit. Spiral sigils of agreement. It was not praise. It was recognition. Humanity had not become gods. They had become participants. The precursors shared nothing material. No technology. No weapons. Only perspective. The first gift was called the fifth option. It appeared as a thought impossible to unthink. Not a tool, a realization. All conflict contained hidden choices, omitted not by design but by unawareness. War, peace, surrender, negotiation, all were shadows of forgotten alternatives. Humanity began rewriting history with the fifth option in mind. Mistakes recontextualized, suffering rethreaded into triumph, victory seen anew as tragedies diverted. Global consciousness trembled. The past was no longer fixed. Regret became a design flaw, not a destiny. Then came the second gift, discrepant unity. It allowed groups to act in perfect cohesion without agreement. 1,000 voices could speak with one intent while retaining individual truth. Politics collapsed, not by force, but through irrelevance. Leaders became facilitators of divergence. Progress exploded. Valari remnants observed in silence. Their homeworlds, now self-exiled, refused to rejoin galactic affairs. But they watched and learned. Elias entered the thought array once more. He saw the fabric of what came next. Humanity's story was no longer a rise. It was a pivot from survival to stewardship. The universe was vast, yes, but not empty. Countless minds had risen and fallen without meeting. Humanity would become the bridge. They began constructing the final device. Not a weapon, not a beacon. A question posed at scale. It would activate once every sentient species could contribute. Its purpose: To find out if existence itself had a purpose beyond curiosity. Elias did not see its completion. He aged. The 9 became 7, then 4, then 1, and finally, they too passed beyond recognition. But their thoughts remained embedded in the array. New generations arose. They no longer feared darkness. They taught their children how to ask properly. Across the stars, species once hidden began to emerge, drawn not by promise of conquest,